Welcome everyone to today's session, Thinking Outside of the Mode, Improving Accuracy by Choosing a Multi-Mode. My name is Malgorzata and I'm super happy to be here with you and to have the pleasure to kick off today's session. Very soon I will introduce Alan and I will give the stage to Alan, who will speak about all of the details of a multi-mode approach in market research. But before we go there, I want to set a scene. I have the pleasure to introduce a little bit more about who we are. And perhaps some of you have never heard about that particular company. Maybe you're even wondering how to pronounce it. Is it Enghouse? Is it Enghouse? So it's Enghouse Interactive. And we are very happy to announce that actually as of a few months, Nebu and Servox, previously known as CFMC, we became a part of this bigger global corporation. The Enghouse Interactive is focused as a company focused on customer interaction, especially within contact centers. And with this newest acquisition, Nebu, and with the Servox that is a part of Enghouse from 2017, we are happy to announce that Enghouse Interactive is actually expanding the focus on the insights industry. So you will hear much more about us. And what is really interesting for you, and I'm sure you will get a lot of benefits of this new situation, is that we can tap into this really powerful suite of tools meant for call centers. As our new unit, Market Research and Communities, we will be also supporting this call center world of Enghouse. And this brings me to introduction of Alan. Alan Porter has been appointed General Manager for Enghouse Interactive Market Research and Communities, previously involved with Servox for many, many years. Alan brings a wealth of experience to this new role. He will be providing strategic leadership and will be driving our product strategy. Alan, thank you so much for taking the time, being here with us. The stage is yours.
All right. Thank you, Malgo, for that very kind introduction. And I'm happy to be here with NewMR. I've looked at many of the videos, and I'm honored to be part of that mix. So today we're going to be talking about multi-mode and some of the concepts and issues around that and things that you might want to think about. So to begin with, let's just talk a little bit about some of the history and kind of where we stand and where we're at today. So, historically there were a lot of concerns about multi-mode, that it was difficult to do and that it created duplicative work. But there's been a lot of technological enhancements over the years that have addressed many of these issues. So technology that allows you to mix modes, mix vendors, mix your organizations together, have really improved. And so a lot of that more difficult work that would traditionally have maybe increased some of the cost have dissipated. You have now call centers that are working from home. You have IVR that's making a resurgence. People are doing more IVR, and you have a blurring of the lines between mobile, web, phone. All of the different modes of communication are starting to blur. Yet a lot of times in research, we're still very mode centric. One of the issues that really kind of spans across all modes is being able to recruit the right people, and recruitment is becoming more and more difficult. We'll talk about that some more and how those can be addressed. And all of that is to kind of help us get to a point where we can reduce some of the non-response bias. And it's my contention that the non-response is becoming a bigger issue, and that's what's driving some of the issues that we see in things like polling. So we'll dive into that a little bit more. So there are a lot of topics that we're going to touch on here, but we'll hopefully make it a little interesting. So we'll talk about enhancing that respondent experience, more about ROI, how can we improve return on investment and reduce some of the cost, increasing the reach, how do you get to the audience that you're looking for, enhancing your data. There's some ways that you can mix modes together to actually enhance your data. And then kind of along with that, some considerations for questionnaire and mode specific issues. And finally, how does all this tie together to improve not only your respondent experience, but the customer experience if you're doing customer experience work. So I've often said that, we as an industry, we should be talking to customers in the way they want to talk to us. So too often, I think that we continue to force the customer, force the respondent into the modes that we want, regardless of how they may want to communicate what is natural for them. And also not only how they want it, but you think about issues around technology gaps. You have demographic drivers. So if you're looking for feedback on healthcare, for example, the senior citizen population is very important there. A lot of those folks may not be comfortable with web-based modes. So something like a phone survey would be a better fit, but you might be able to mix those together. So that you can get the young and the seniors combined. There are also cultural differences. Certain cultures respond better to certain modes than others. And then for the respondent themselves, there's a convenience. What makes sense for them to be able to do at that moment? Maybe some modes don't work at that moment. Maybe they don't have web access at that time, but they can make a phone call. So having an inbound IVR mixed with a web mode could provide a lot of opportunity for people to take that survey again in the way that works for them, and in turn reducing our non-response biases. Considering the ROI, it's often a difficult concept to really quantify. There are a lot of non-tangibles that really are difficult to set a monetary value to. For example, the enterprises or goodwill or the brand reputation. One thing that and I'll talk about this some more is the survey itself is a touch point, and I think oftentimes we forget that it is a touch point in how the survey behaves, how it looks, how we interact with them, how we invite them. That is part of the brand experience. So again, a lot of times I think when we look at the cost. It's a very simple calculation of labor, telco, email cost. So just those kind of hard dollar costs without thinking about things like data quality. So the data quality itself can be impaired. And if you have bad data quality, then you're likely to make poor business decisions. And that could be much more expensive than whatever you're saving on the cost of the methodology. And again, you have these intangibles like the customer experience. So you want to make sure that people have the right experience. So all of those go into your ROI calculations. But there's some strategies that we can talk about on how to reduce cost overall. So one of the keys is to make sure that you're talking to the right people. If you're going over quota, if you're talking to the wrong people, you're wasting dollars, you're wasting time. So you want to make sure that every contact is a valuable contact. And sometimes value is definable, right? So there may be certain customer types that are more important to others. So you want to be able to drive those and reach those people in different ways. So your targeting, how you target people, how you sample people, all of that can come into play. But technology can help with that as well. So if you're able to have dialer controls that are tied in with your quota system so that you're not making dials that you don't need, that can be very cost effective. Katie can be easily 20 to 30 times more expensive than a web complete. So anything that you can do there to enhance that productivity is going to pay off. And there's a lot of things that come into play driving those costs, including telco, and especially if it's international. International costs can be a big driver. Your general incidence rates and RDD versus listed. So one of the things you might consider is mixing the modes together, where you can use IVR, for example. So IVR is much more cost effective. You don't have the interviewer labor time. So you might do something like a Katie recruit to IVR to reduce those costs. So you start the relationship on Katie, you get people screened, get them in, and then transfer to IVR to finish up the survey and reduce your labor cost. So by mixing these modes together, you can reduce cost and target the quotas. So if you think about kind of a traditional multi-mode design, if you start on the traditionally least expensive methodology, which would normally be online, you can use that to start to fill your quotas. As your quotas fill and your response rates on your online methodology fall off, then you can start to fill that quota with IVR and or phone. And so you're using a least cost approach to achieving your quota goals. So again, it's about reaching that audience, and there are more and growing limitations in trying to reach the audience. That is becoming one of the biggest issues that we face in the industry. There are legal limitations, whether it's GDPR, the TCPA regulations, CAN spam, kind of go down the line. There's a lot of legal and regulatory limitations, but also respondent fatigue. Everybody wants that customer feedback, and so people are inundated with survey invitations to give their feedback, and that is causing fatigue and reducing our response rates. The connect rates at the same time are going down. So email open rates are down, phone connect rates are down. So trying to get people to connect is becoming more and more difficult. And as this is happening, we're also fragmenting our communication. It wasn't that long ago that if you wanted to contact somebody, you either used mail or you used phone. Now, those were the kind of the two methods. But if you think about all the ways that you communicate with businesses, your friends and family today, it might be through text, it might be through email, it might be through a phone call. There are chat applications. There's all sorts of different methods that people are using. So that communication process is fragmenting, and all of this is leading to greater non-response biases. We have been trying to fix a lot of that as a industry through weighting in large part, but there are limitations to what can be done with regard to weighting, and some of that has shown itself in the last few years in errors in polling. Especially political polling has really started to show that if you don't have that right weighting scheme, if you're not getting to the right people, you're going to miss some of those underlying trends, especially when some of the differences may be fairly tight. Likewise, there are issues with the type of research that you're doing. So certain types of research can have non-response biases, exacerbating the data quality. So if you think about healthcare, again, kind of going back to that idea with reaching out to the senior citizens, that may have a definite issue. One thing to consider is having more active modes like an outbound Katie or an outbound IVR may help to mitigate some of that by trying to draw people in as opposed to a more passive recruiting method like an email where you're just hoping that they open and click. We can never disregard budgets. Budgets are always there, and those often drive the modes that are pursued and used. But we do need to think about that because if the mode used is cost effective but doesn't lead to the best data, then what have you got? So I think we really need to think more about the modes and how we can use modes to drive the quality and of the data and gather deeper insights. So you might want to consider things like a KD to IVR design for sensitive topics, sensitive questions. So if you're asking people about things that are personal and sensitive, people might be more receptive to doing that in an IVR situation. So you can recruit, build that relationship with the person through the KD call, and then hand it over to the IVR, do that multimodal design for them to be able to answer those questions in a more anonymous way. And then don't discount some things that you might not have thought about, like using KD to recruit to web mode for visual types of stimuli. So a couple of years ago, we actually did a design where we recruited people on KD, and while the call was going on, they received a link and were able to do a dial test for an ad. And then once the dial test was done, the KD call continued. It was never hung up, it just continued. The data was all there, and they were able to use that to drive the survey. So all modes have an inherent bias, but there's a lot of research that I've read talking about the non-response bias and how that is becoming a bigger issue, and possibly one that's even more significant than mode bias. So mode bias has historically been one of the biggest concerns with multimodal designs. Are you mixing modes together and actually adding more error into the data by mixing the modes? I would contend that in many cases, the non-response bias is actually a bigger problem than the mixing of the modes. And there's some interesting research in that regard. So all of this brings us to kind of this idea of how do you build these workflows, whether for a customer experience or anything else, but and enhance that respondent experience. So can you have an invitation that gives the respondent options? They can go to the web, or they can go to the phone, or they can even switch modes. So for example, you can send somebody a web link invitation and then give them the option to receive a phone call. So maybe it's just more convenient for them to do it over the phone, or they just prefer that methodology. So why not let them at that point just schedule a call? That could be with a live agent, KD call, back to them, or they could even be routed into an IVR. And IVR and KD can also be blended together. So you can, we talked about, recruiting on KD and sending them to IVR, but the opposite is also true. You can start people on IVR, maybe screen them, and then route them to a live KD interviewer to finish the design. So, and I'll wrap it up with this. There are, when you're thinking about, that workflow, the customer transactional experience is what kind of comes to mind a lot for me. I've spent a lot of my career in that space, so this is kind of near and dear to me. So if you think about three, kind of key areas, a post-transaction follow-up survey. If it's through a call center, you might want to very naturally use a transfer to an IVR, so an IVR methodology. But if you are needing to do more sophisticated sampling, at that point, some kind of post call survey is in order. If you need the entire sample set, you may need to know the entire N, or how many calls that particular agent received that day on what topics to be able to sort and develop the quotas and the hierarchies. So we did a study for a healthcare plan, and that was exactly what we had to do. So again, these were senior citizens, so an IVR methodology made sense as opposed to a web-based survey. And we would get all the transaction calls every night, And from that, we were able to do the sample selection, make sure that we had an equal representation across all the different agents. There were thousands of them, so you needed to balance all that. There were different types of calls that the respondents were making, depending on the health plans that they were calling about. And that way we could do proper sampling and handle the quotas and make sure that we are driving toward the end goal that they were looking for. Point of sale surveys. There, we all get those. I went to a drive-through restaurant last night, and on the receipt there was an option for an IVR call, or you could go to a website and take the survey. And that makes sense. Give people those options. How do they want to talk to you? But all that data can come back together in one spot. You don't have to, mash everything together to get yourself to that point. Loyalty programs. That's another one that's going to be, similar also with some of the sampling ideas. So often in loyalty programs, you're going to want to balance across the franchises. You might want to look at different types of transactions, the types of the amount of spend, or the maybe what they purchase, those sorts of things, and be able to do proper sampling, and then send them an invitation. So again, how do you communicate with them? And the respondents, those are your loyalty customers. They may have very well designated not just a language preference, but a communication preference. Do they prefer email? Do they prefer phone calls? Do they like text messages? How do they like to be engaged? And I think we can help the customer experience, help the brand experience, and help reduce non-response biases by mixing these modes together. Malgo, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's really interesting. I love always hearing from you. A lot of experience on the Servox side, definitely, with the additions on the Nebu side. Maybe it's a good moment now to give it back to Ray, and let's see if there are any questions that we could answer.